Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our CPD webinar this afternoon on Little Wandle Code and supporting students in Key Stage 3 with phonics gaps. A great session, I think, to start off 2026 and the National Year of Reading. So thank you ever so much for joining us. Just a quick word about the English Association, which is hosting this session. We are a subject association and a learned society, which was formed in 1906 to support, promote and celebrate the discipline of English studies. We cover all stages of education, from primary and early years through to secondary and further education, to higher education and beyond, and we cover all parts of the discipline across language, linguistics, literature and creative writing. I'm Becky, and it's my privilege to be the Chief Exec of the English Association and to be along for the ride this afternoon. Now, events like this one are made possible by the fantastic contribution of our volunteer speakers. So thank you so much to Sarah and to Alex, who will be joining us shortly, for being so generous with your time and your ideas. I'm really grateful to you for that. Our members also make it possible for us to keep these events free and open to all by paying their membership fees. So if you would like to contribute to the national conversation about English and help support our discipline, please do consider joining us. Membership starts at just £29, enables you to support our events and campaigning and advocacy work for a whole year, and you get access to a wide range of membership benefits, including online access to all of our journals and publications. Okay, it's now my pleasure to hand over to Sarah to kick us off for this afternoon. So Sarah, if you want to just introduce yourself briefly and then get us started. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Becky. And hi, everybody. Lovely to see you this evening. So my name's Sarah Paxton. I am always have been and always will be a primary school teacher at heart. But for the last 3 years, I've been working at Little Wandle as the programme developer. And the programme I'm going to talk to you about this afternoon has been my absolute passion project for the last 3 years. So I've got a few slides to share with you to talk to you about, to give you the context about the programme and to talk to you about phonics at secondary level. Hopefully one of my colleagues, Alex Scull, will be joining us in a moment, and then she's going to talk to you about sort of the realities, the practicalities of the programme in a living, breathing school. So I'm just going to make sure I'm sharing the sound of my slide and get the okay. So Becky, you'll shout if I'm not showing the right one, but I hope I can see my title. So 3 broad aims for this session this afternoon. First of all, why phonics at secondary? So really kind of understanding what is it we're doing, talking about phonics at secondary school. Surely that's a primary problem. Actually the reality is it isn't. So that's why we're here. Then giving you an overview of the Little Wandle Code pilot. So our response to the problem of children needing phonics at secondary school, and then giving you some practical ideas around strategies to help any struggling readers that you might have at secondary school. Okay, so why phonics at secondary? We're going to really unpick what is it, what is the reason that we're getting children who are 11 years old coming into year 7 and still lacking some of those fundamental skills that underpin successful reading. And I wanted to start with this great quote from Marianne Wolf, who I hope you're aware of her work already, who's a cognitive neuroscientist and a reading expert. Writes brilliantly about the science of reading. So she makes the excellent point that we are not born to read, we're not programmed to read. So this quote, we human beings were never born to read, we invented reading and then had to teach it to every new generation. Each new reader comes to reading with a fresh brain, one that is programmed to speak, see and think, but not to read. So I'd like to start with that quote because it's important to understand and for us to remember as competent readers that it's not a skill that we're born to do, it's not a natural skill, and actually it is really hard. So I think we need to be humble, and when we're working with students, understand that it's not a natural born skill for anybody. So the next slide shows you a model which again I'm sure you're familiar with, but I do think it's a really helpful one to use when you're thinking about reading at secondary level, at primary level as well. So the simple view of reading by Guth and Tumner. Now, obviously, what they've done here is provide a really helpful way to understand the two main components of successful reading, which are word recognition skills and language comprehension skills. And the fact that to be a successful reader, you need to have mastered both of those areas. And looking at those children on the screen, you can see by the end of primary, most children are in that top right-hand quadrant. They're good, strong language comprehension skills and good word recognition skills. Unfortunately, though, you'll have some children who might have excellent word recognition skills, but poor language comprehension, bottom right. They might be really good language comprehenders, but have poor word recognition, or they might have a barrier to reading, which would be in the bottom left-hand quadrant, so both. So Little Wandle Code is looking at those children for whom decoding is the primary barrier, because we know that without that, they're not going to be able to become successful readers. So to go alongside the simple view of reading, a bit of a more complex view of reading, a bit more nuanced. Again, I'm sure you're familiar with this, but I think it's a really important way to understand the complexity of successful reading. So Scarborough's reading rope. And you can see there that you've got your two skills, language comprehension and word recognition, but broken down into their composite skills. So under language comprehension, children need to have really strong background knowledge. They need to have good vocabulary, a strong understanding of language structures, verbal reasoning, and literacy knowledge. And all of those sub-skills go into making their skilled reading. And then for word recognition, when we talk about that, what we're talking about is that children need to have strong phonological awareness, strong decoding, so that understanding of the alphabetic principle, and a strong bank of sight recognition words that they've moved into their orthographic score. So that, there's a lot that goes on. It's not a natural skill, and children have to master all of these skills in order to be able to read fluently and confidently and with understanding. So Little Wandle Code, as I've said, we're targeting decoding primarily. And so we're looking at those word recognition skills, the phonological awareness, decoding, and the sight recognition, building up automaticity. So the other sort of layer to it not being natural, it being quite hard, is the fact that English is a very complex alphabetic code. And just to compare, just to sort of put this in context, as you might know, there are much simpler alphabetic codes in the world. I've picked two here, so Spanish and Finnish. So in Spanish, you've got 27 letters, 24 sounds. Finnish, 29 letters, 25 sounds. So almost sort of one-to-one correspondence between a letter making a consistent sound. And in English, we've got 26 letters and 44 sounds. So straight away, you can see how complex our code is. The fact that we have to have single letters, but also combinations of either 2 letters, digraphs, or 3 letters, trigraphs, or 4 letters, quadraphs, which combine together to make different sounds. And if you look on the right-hand side of the screen, you can see just one example amongst many of how complex our code is. So the letters CH, making a digraph, making the sound ch, as in the word church. But also the CH can make a k sound, as in the word chemist, or a ch sound, as in the word machine. And also we can make the sound ch with different spellings. So we can actually make the sound ch with T-U-R-E, as in culture, and we can make the sound ch with T-C-H, as in match. But it's just one example amongst many of how it is complex. And if you think that the average length of time a Spanish child learns to master their alphabetic code is approximately 6 months, and the average length of time an English child takes to master our alphabetic code is approximately 2 years. So that kind of puts it in perspective, I think, and helps us again understand the challenge that some of our secondary age students have had to meet in order to become competent readers. Just a note I wanted to make, which we hear a lot, which is, well, I never learned phonics. So, why is it that we're insisting on teaching our children phonics, and that's not a way in which I learned to read? And it is really hard for us, I think, as really competent readers to, I mean, first of all, remember how we learnt to read, but also it's so automatic for us now that we can't really recognise that actually we have learned phonics even if we weren't explicitly taught it. And to sort of a bit of a sort of exercise to help hopefully you recognise this, I'm just going to show you a word on the screen. For a moment to read that. And I know that what you've done in your head, you will have broken that down and you will have sounded that out in effect you would have looked at the letters and you would have understood what sounds they made, and you would have been able to use that really secure automatic understanding of the alphabetic code to link the letters to the sounds, to have read that as bibliokleptomania. And that's, we use our phonics all the time. It's just that we don't actually kind of recognise it because it's become so automatic for us. We've moved so many words from our we don't have to decode words. They're in our orthographic store. We've retained them as whole units now. But it's when we come across new words, longer words, difficult words, that's when we kind of notice that we are actually falling back to our strong understanding of phonics. So for those of you who are interested, bibliokleptomania, I'm sure those of you with a strong understanding of etymology will know that is the compulsion to steal books. Okay, so just an example. Now thinking about why are some students arriving at secondary needing phonics? Surely this is a skill set that is taught at primary level. So what is it about now that means that we're recognising this need? I think the first thing to say is that if we recognise that the current year 7s were in year 1 during school closures during COVID, so the prime year for teaching early reading, and that was really disruptive for them. Also, we're seeing that there are a lot of new or recently arrived children into the UK, so they're learning English from scratch often. So that is another reason why they're really needing to learn phonics. Attendance, we know, especially again since COVID, that's been really, really disruptive for children's education. So lots of children have huge missing periods in their primary education. We often see that children have really early visual or hearing conditions that have been either recognised or recognised too late, or have gone unrecognised still. So that has a real impact on, for example, things like phonological awareness. And I'm going to hold my hands up and say, I'm a primary school teacher, but I know that sometimes there's incomplete phonics teaching at primary school. So sometimes what happens is that teachers or schools will teach the phonics screening check. They will pass the phonics screening check, albeit not necessarily glowingly. They'll have got just above the threshold, and then they will stop teaching phonics. And this happens less and less, but it is still happening. So you'll get children who just haven't had a chance to properly consolidate their phonics learning before they're swiftly taken off phonics learning and told that they are able to read, even though it's not secure. And finally, it's important to say that for some children, mastering the alphabetic code takes longer, and it does take many years of consistent quality instruction. And that includes with dyslexia. So I think here it's important to have a quick sort of note about dyslexia. And I've just taken this quote from the reading framework, which says that dyslexic pupils may take longer than other pupils to embed their knowledge of GPCs, that's grapheme phoneme correspondences, so those are the links between the letters and the sounds. And they may need supporting in small incremental steps from the very beginning so they achieve success every day. However, systematic synthetic phonics is the best evidenced way to teach decoding, including for these pupils. So it's not that there's another way into reading, it's not that you can somehow bypass teaching the link between letters and sounds, the alphabetic code, which is what phonics does. You can't bypass that, but for some students it will take a lot longer. Okay, so hopefully that's given you a bit of context about what phonics is, why we're teaching it, why reading's hard, but also how it's really underpinned by strong decoding skills and how phonics supports children to access those decoding skills. So I'm going to talk to you quickly now about the code pilot. I'm not talking for too long. And just start by saying, why was it that we needed to develop code? So I kind of touched on it already, the fact that these current year sevens were really impacted by COVID. And 3 years ago now, we're part of an educational trust in Southwest London, and Chestnut Grove Academy, our secondary school, came to us and said, we have children who are just so behind, they are unable to access the curriculum. And so we know that, we know historically, if you look at the results in terms of stats reading attainment, for over 5 years now, approximately 25% don't meet age-related expectations at the end of primary. That goes up to 38% it did last year for disadvantaged children. So we've known that, and actually now what's been recognised is that these children are coming into secondary school, and we're being a bit better at like questioning the why. So we're kind of going beyond just saying, oh, they've got a reading age of 6, they've got a reading age of 7. We're actually now beginning to sort of say, well, what is it, thinking about Scarborough's reading rope, which one of these strands is the one that these children have an issue with? So Chestnut Grove Academy came to us and they were saying, help, what can we do? And from that, we started to develop a phonics program. Initially, we tried using a primary, we have a primary program, we have a Key Stage 2 program as well. We tried using that. What we quickly realised is that secondary age children are obviously a very different kind of beast. So they are, potentially they've had years of instruction, and not necessarily good instruction, but they, for them actually motivation is a huge piece because they are their experience, they don't see themselves as readers, and so we had to develop a program that really responded to their needs and was designed for that age group particularly. So from our first sort of tries in Chestnut Grove, we developed a pilot which we have worked with. You can see the little dots on the map there, with over 60 schools across the country. And I don't really need to tell you this, but I think it's important to say again, is that the stakes are so high. So I hate to quote from Ofsted, but it's a really good blog. So in 2022, they really started turning their attention onto those secondary schools who were falling behind with their reading. And this quote, I think, is a good one, which sums it up. To fulfil the demands of the secondary school curriculum, pupils need to be able to read age-appropriate text fluently. Pupils who cannot read well are not able to access the curriculum, and I think it's that last sentence that's so important, and are disadvantaged for life. So, we know that children who are not able to read well not only perform, badly in terms of academically, but the knock-on effects and the lifelong knock-on effects are very well documented. So, it really, really matters that we are intervening at this stage and getting things right, so that they can access that curriculum in stage 3 and beyond. So just to think about looking at that 25% who are not at age-related expectations, what we're not saying is that 25% of those children need phonics instruction. That is luckily not the case. So what's interesting about the cohort who are not age-related expectations is understanding whether it's an issue around fluency, around comprehension, around phonics, around motivation and enjoyment, or actually whether it's a combination of those factors. And from our pilot with 60 schools over the last 3 years, we have carried out assessments with, well, in the first year we had over 10,000 students. This year we've just in September assessed just under 10,000 students. So we've got a huge wealth of data to help us understand the profile of those students and what barriers they have around reading. So on the screen here, you can see some screenshots from our screen assessment. So the first thing we did is we knew that we had to understand what the issue was. It wasn't just, we couldn't just say they're not very good at reading. Obviously, we had to say, what is it? What is the precise need that these children have? So we devised a screen which looked at reading enjoyment, which looked at reading comprehension, which looked at decoding and which looked at fluency, so that we're able to kind of get that broader picture around where exactly the need is, so then we're able to meet that need. So as I said at the beginning, it's a phonics program for secondary, and so our priority is really scooping up that bottom left-hand quadrant, those children who are the most vulnerable, who have issues with language and word decoding, and to support them with an intervention. Now, the intervention, just to give you a summary, it's a small group intervention. It has 3 different pathways, so it takes children right from the simplest code, right from the beginning, to the complex code. So if you think right at the beginning, it's a SAT pin, so you're taking kids right back to that one-to-one with single letter GPC, right to that complex code. For example, that ch sound and all the alternative spellings that we looked at just now. It focuses on phonemic awareness, so it's teaching the alphabetic principle, but it's also recognising that actually for lots of children, phonemic awareness is a skill that's not often taught well, so it incorporates that as well. It practices the skills, so yes, it's teaching the knowledge of this letter makes this sound, but what's often missing for secondary learners is the practice of being able to hear sounds within a word and segment, to pull that word apart to hear the sounds and push them back together and blend those sounds to read a word. So to spell and to read using phonics. And so, yeah, for that reason, it applies the learning into both spelling and into reading. It also, we were really passionate about making sure that it was supporting students, yes, with their phonics, but also knowing that it's not ever going to be just the phonics that's going to be an issue. We have built in read aloud time into the intervention. So in effect, what this means is you've got 2 days focusing on phonics through spelling and reading, got a day of reading practice, and then there's a session where you're devoting part of that session to sharing a story with children. So children listen to a story that's read aloud to them. And it's a story that's at a level that's higher than they'd be able to read independently. But what we wanted to do with that time is help them develop that kind of community within their group where they're sharing a story, listening to a great story, and it's nothing's expected of them in terms of there's no comprehension questions. They don't have to write about it. They're just listening and enjoying a story. So we've done a really big piece around motivation, so helping children develop their self-efficacy, so they really see themselves as a reader who enjoys books, whether they're read aloud to them or whether they're being read to them. Whether they're reading them themselves. Okay, so I just want to play just a really...
The first activity.
Sorry, a short video, which will start automatically, I didn't realise. A short video which will outline, just show you what the resources look like. I think I've got time. I've just got time. So I'll just show you now what a little bit of the lesson structure looks like, to give you a sense of what the slides look like in an actual lesson. Oh, and now it won't play. Hang on. Apologies.
The first activity is called Map It. In this activity, students map the sounds they hear to the letters they read in their workbook. This activity really reinforces that link between letters and sounds that underpins the alphabetic code. The next activity, Change It, is an activity in which students focus in on some previously taught phonic code, for example here R. They read that code within the context of a word, first of all in their head, then out loud, and then really importantly, they code it out. So they segment that word into its phonemes. And what this does is really support students to know how to approach the reading of unfamiliar words by giving them that strategy about how to look for code that they already know and then use their understanding of phonemes to be able to read and spell that word. Then they learn new code. First, they hear and practice saying that new sound, the new code, and then they get to read that new code. And then we link the sound to the code by using a light-hearted mnemonic, in this case, purple turtle. Really importantly, once we've looked at the code, is when we learn that new code through curriculum words. First of all, students hear the new word, then they count how many syllables in the word, and then they count how many phonemes they can hear. This is all before they see the word, and that's a really important way for students to focus on the sounds of the words, and that supports them to link it to the letters on the page. As soon as they've read the word, they have the chance to apply that into spelling the word. And once they've spelt the word, they have to code it out in their workbooks. That is, they mark the phonemes underneath the word in their workbook. What this does is it really reinforces that phonic code knowledge. At this point, teachers provide a definition for that curriculum word, and students apply that knowledge again into the reading of that word in the context of a short sentence, and we give them an image to support their understanding. So it's a really thorough way to support students not only to learn new phonic code, but also to learn it in the context of words which they will encounter back in class in the wider curriculum.
Okay, so just a little kind of snapshot of some of the way the activities support children's phonics. So just very quickly, through the pilot, we've been lucky enough to work with some incredible schools over the last 3 years, and I think the big lessons that we've learned so much from working with them, but the importance of regular, consistent teaching. I mean, it's kind of really obvious, but actually for our pilot schools who are delivering the programme the most successfully, it's where it's really consistent, so children are getting that listening often. The importance of knowledge and skills. So, as I said before, it's not just about teaching GPCs, it's about teaching the skill to segment and blend so that children are able to apply that when they go outside of the intervention. The importance of reading miles. So children who need this intervention have missed out on hours and hours and hours of reading. And so we need to get them practicing. They need to be reading. So the quantity of just sitting and reading books that are accessible to them is so important. And then finally, we didn't quite anticipate this, but and Alex will talk about this in a moment, but how important relationships are. Children who are not readers, who don't see themselves as readers when they start secondary school, can be really vulnerable, and it can have an impact on all aspects of their school life and their home life. And actually to come to an intervention where there's a teacher who cares, that's absolutely crucial. So really important that relationships are not forgotten within this intervention. Okay, I feel like I've gone over a little bit, but I'm going to turn now to Alex and talk about the pilot, the reality of the pilot in the school. So strategies to help struggling readers. And Alex, I put together some questions for you.
Yeah, hello.
Hello. So tricky because I can't see you, so it's a bit strange.
Oh, can't you? Am I not on your video?
I think you are. It's just because I'm sharing. So I'm just going to carry on. So Alex, can you talk to us about, just how is being part of the Code Pilot helped your students?
I mean, more than we ever realised, I think. And it's not just about how it's helped the students. I think it's helped us as teachers be able to help the students, because I think as secondary school English teachers, we recognised that students were coming to us in year 7 and there was this gap, but we didn't feel equipped in terms of how to deal with that. We're not experts in phonics. The only way that, some of us had some understanding is if we'd done it with our own children. It wasn't how we learned to read. It felt like a really sort of alien ground to us, but what felt like an important thing that we wanted to be able to tackle, but weren't quite sure how. And so when we heard about the Code Pilot, it was something that we were really keen to get involved with. And I think, having done it for a year, we're now in the 2nd year of working with you in the pilot. Our students have really benefited, because rather than just understanding that reading is a problem for these students. We actually understand at a granular level what the particular issues are for those students, and more importantly, how we can actually actively support them, not as a sort of one-off intervention, but as a sort of ongoing program of support. And it's not an underestimate to say that it really has changed those students' school experience. And I think that if we hadn't done it, and we hadn't done it in year 7, it's not just how they would be performing in English, it's access to the curriculum for all their subjects.
I'm going to stop sharing because I can't see you and it's not nice. So I'm going to do that if that's okay, Becky. That's better. Okay. I mean, that's obviously, Becky, I mean, do feel free to come in. So Alex, what is there anything that kind of surprised you, like any particular stories or anything that that you weren't?
So I think, if we were completely honest, we were a bit nervous about how our students would respond to the program. We were a bit worried that they feel like they've made this massive transitional step to secondary school. They're at big school now, and we did worry that they would perhaps feel that this was sort of going back to primary, but I think that was our worry, and it definitely wasn't something that we saw from the students. So just to sort of contextualize, we're a very large secondary school in South London. We've got 285 students in a cohort. And when we screened our cohort last year, we weren't sure how many of them would need it, and in the end we had 15 students who identified for code across the 3 pathways. And again, we weren't sure if they would again find it a bit babyish with the sort of chanting of sound, but they absolutely love it. And again, I think we felt guilty that we'd sort of brought this preconception about how they would feel about it. I think it really gave them a confidence, and they liked working together in the groups. They liked working in the small groups, and the regularity of it. I think having this sort of special attention, they really enjoyed that. They responded really well to it. And I think having those milestones of feeling that they had achieved something, they'd moved on to something else, I think for many of these students, they'd spent perhaps so long masking the fact that they couldn't read. Actually, sort of, a teacher saying, "Okay, well, we're going to focus on this one, then we're going to do this one," and them sort of feeling those little wins as they went along. It really sort of built their confidence. And then, as you were saying before, it's not just about reading age, but actually we have had some phenomenal successes with it. And we did make a note of a few case studies. So we had our lowest reading age student that we had last year, when they first came to us, had a reading age of 6 years, 3 months. And during the course of year 7, being part of the pilot and sort of other forms of intervention that we were taking back into the classroom as well, she then made 2 years, 5 months progress by the end of the year, and is really flourishing. And as you're saying, it's not just about a number and data in that way, but actually the confidence to actually then put your hand up to read aloud in lessons, confidence in answering questions. And that is going to sort of improve engagement across all aspects of school life. And I think, I don't know if you're going to ask me, this is a slightly separate question, but what made it work, I'd say, is that you have to get the whole school to buy in. Like it doesn't work otherwise.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you that because I wish, if only, Alex, that all our pilot schools were as, I'm going to be really honest, like obviously you develop a program and then it goes into the real world and schools will do different things with it and unexpected things. And, your school has made a real success of it. So what we're really interested in is like sharing the things, that the magic ingredients that you've put into making the program successful. So how have you made sure that your whole school is on board? What are the things that you've done?
So I think, the support the Little Wandle gave us in that you create that sort of whole school PowerPoint and sort of audio recording that we shared with the whole school in a very early sort of inset way back in September when we started the pilot, and really made it clear that literacy is not just the responsibility of an English teacher or the English department. This is a whole school priority. It's a whole school responsibility for everybody. And that doesn't mean that you need to know what all the fancy terms are as, a teacher of a different subject, but you need to know that this is going on, and you need to feel that you've got strategies. And I think that's what we really sort of went with the angle. So we did do the whole school training. And I think what was particularly shocking and really resonated with a lot of teachers who sort of came to speak to me about it afterwards was when you, I think there's a particular statistic in that training video. It says something like, even if you've got sort of a 90% understanding, what that actually looked like in terms of symbols. And I think that was the sort of light bulb moment. People were like, okay, yeah, we really see that. And so then we use that sort of training as a whole school internal training that I sort of worked with the school on, in terms of actually what could become active reading strategies. How do you promote whole school literacy? And that really sort of started a whole school conversation about, and I think there was just a nervousness from other teachers about not wanting to support literacy, but not actually having an understanding of or ideas of what that might look like in a maths lesson or in a geography lesson. And so I think that has really helped. So it does need to be a sort of consistent whole school approach in that way. Keep coming back to it. We've now got literacy reps for each subject. So they come and meet once a half term, and actually they meet. Our literacy reps are the teachers that deliver the programme. So then they sort of get feedback, they hear what's happening from Little Wandle, but then are also sort of given strategies in terms of what they can then take back into their own department. So it is an ongoing project. I'm not saying we've necessarily cracked it, but I feel like we are definitely all on the same page now.
Yeah, amazing. I mean, yeah, it's so lovely to hear that from our point of view, obviously. So what would you, I mean, in terms of those individual children who are in the intervention and they go back into class, what have you found anything that helps them transfer the skills that they're learning in the intervention, or is that something that you're looking to develop?
I think again that sort of everything's still ongoing. We're still learning. I think we've done the pilot, fully completed for a year. We're obviously in the second year of it now with a different cohort of students. But I think what they've really found useful is the sort of, because they had the pattern of in terms of the intervention session. So we had 3 hours a week, and what we did in those was sort of taught the 3 half-hour sessions in a week, and then they did half an hour of reading aloud as well in the sessions, and they loved that opportunity to read aloud. So I think because they developed the confidence of reading aloud in a small group, and obviously they'd still make mistakes, but they developed their own self-correction. They'd go back like, oh no, I mean like ch, at, and they'd go back and start blending. And sort of, I think again, you just having teachers use those like, okay, no, sound it out, why don't you blend that together? And so just having the simplest of sort of vocabulary around it, and it being consistent, and then having that approach, that then would give students the confidence to perhaps read aloud a passage in class. What we did say to teachers was, for these students, perhaps you could just pre-warn them which paragraph they were going to have, so they didn't necessarily feel that they were being put on the spot, like, okay, you're going to read paragraph 5, being told in advance, okay, when we get to this one, that's going to be your one. But they really, really enjoyed it. They actually were very sad when they asked if they were going to carry on doing it this year, because they really enjoyed it. I mean, I think from a practical element, and I'm sure people are sort of thinking, well, how would this work in school? Because it does mean coming out of other lessons. But what we did was just changed it every half term. We informed the parents. Parents knew what were going on, and why we were doing this, why it was so important. And then every half term, we just changed the carousel of when the lessons were taking place. So it wasn't like the same subject was being hit.
Yeah, that's really important. I think we were talking a bit, Alex, by email, weren't we? The fact that I think secondaries are hoping, obviously, for like a quick fix as such. They've got GCSEs in mind. They're really focused on that end game, and actually, years of not being a successful reader isn't a quick fix. It does take a lot of time for a child starting with phonics needs to get up to the same level where they're able to pick up a typical Key Stage 3 curriculum text and read it independently and fluently. So I think what's really gratifying to hear is that that commitment to it being a sort of shift in how you see things, like it's an ongoing project, like that understanding that year 7 might take all of year 7, and a lot of year 8. Your starting point is so low, but you're going to get there because actually you're giving them this kind of, not the gift of reading and being able to then and independent.
Yeah, because I think you're giving them a toolkit. We've given the teachers a toolkit, we've given the students a toolkit, but we've also given them confidence. And I think it is the combination of both. And, I'm sure other schools are finding that it has actually solved quite a lot of behavioral issues where you realize that actually a lot of, reluctance came from a sort of a masking strategy that had been so perhaps ingrained in primary because they, maybe had missed it for whatever reason that might be. But we did notice a real improvement in behavior in some of the students who are in the program. And I don't know if it's just having that special attention that they really also enjoyed, but also then that confidence of actually I can do this.
Pilot wide, like that was a real unexpected finding for us. We didn't go into this to create a SCMH program. Actually, what we found is that there have been so many benefits in terms of just what you were saying, children being happier, coming into school more happily. I mean, that's been an incredible sort of unexpected win around the program. That we realise how wrapped up in self-esteem reading is.
Yeah.
So if you are able to really support it and nurture that, then it makes a huge difference in other areas. So
yeah. No, we're really pleased to be doing it. And I think, now and the teachers who were doing it before, they didn't know phonics. I mean, it is all delivered by English teachers in our department, but they didn't have that knowledge before. And I think they've developed that confidence now, particularly in the second year of, what it looks like and how it works.
Yeah. I'm just aware of time and questions. Do you want us to kind of look at any of those or?
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Sarah and Alex. I've been absolutely agog. So thank you very much. Yeah, we do have a couple of minutes, so maybe we can come to some of the questions in the chat. So Gail, hello Gail, asks, your assessment questions would be interesting to see in greater depth. I work in adult learning in local authority, so we sometimes struggle with diagnostic assessment materials. So is it possible for anyone to kind of have a look at the code, or how does that work?
I mean, no. I mean, so it's a program that like at the moment we're selling to schools. That might change with our primary program. We do offer it to local authorities and to other, to MATs, for example. But at the moment, it is you would have to be a school in order to buy it, in order to access the detail of the assessments. Certainly, though, you can come to an information briefing where we do go into a lot more detail than we've been able to do today, where we do look at some of those diagnostic materials. We wouldn't share them all, but we would certainly give you an understanding. But just to give you essentially there are three components to the diagnostic assessment. So we look at alien words, so non-words. So we get children to read those, which really helps us understand if they've got that sound knowledge, because they're not. The difficulty we have with older learners is they've learned a lot of words by sight, and that masks a poor knowledge of GPCs of phonics. So what we did to kind of take that away is look at, in effect, a phonics screening check with alien words. So they're forced to read words like biblo, kleptomania, the equivalent of not that one. Then there's a real word reading assessment, which is timed as well. So we get an understanding of their automaticity, how quickly they've actually moved words into their orthographic store. And there's a fluency assessment with a passage. So we look at those three components, which together help us understand where we place them onto the phonics program. So I hope that helps, Gail.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Yeah, that was really helpful. Well, we've come to the end of our time together today. So thank you again. My deep thanks to you, Sarah, and to you, Alex, for sharing your experiences. And thank you to everyone who has joined us as well to listen in. I will be in touch with the recording and the slides. But for now, I will say good evening. I hope you've all got some nice plans to stay cozy, and see you again soon. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.